Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. One of the reasons I was inspired to understand the root causes of disease was to increase the possibility that my family, patients, followers, and even I had the best chance to enjoy as much time as possible with them. If we both know how to optimize ourselves as well as how to avoid what harms us, we'll have a much better chance of having a long, healthy life. Today's guest is Dr. Joseph Antoun, who works with one of the leading global researchers in the area of longevity. That's Professor Walter Longo, director of the Longevity Center at USC. Together, they provide education and products to support a lifestyle that extends health span and life expectancy through natural, dietary, and fasting measures designed to enhance overall longevity, fight age-related disease, and, of course, to live longer, healthier lives. Today, I've asked Dr. Anton to share his perspective on how all of us can achieve our health longevity goals. And with that, I welcome you, Doc, to Protecting Your Nest.
Thank you very much. Lovely to spend time with you today. Hopefully, we'll make some enhancement to our listeners' life.
That's why we live, and that's what
Yeah.
we're going to try to do. And I always feel privileged with the opportunity for people to hear my voice and to hear my guest voice. And I think continuous learning is the path to wellness and just to happiness, because the more you learn, the more you can do to improve. So let's start our longevity conversation by better understanding why you decided to become a longevity expert and why people should trust what you have to say.
Well, I growing up, I always wanted to help patients and improve healthcare. So I decided to be a doctor like yourself, and I did that. And in a very short answer, and I'll elaborate, I then figured out that I'm subscribing to a sick care system, not a healthcare system. And this is why I decided to focus on longevity. But it's not about living long and sick, which is what we're trying to achieve today with the current sick care system. It's about loving. It's about leading a healthy, high quality, long life, and we call that health span. So the real word we want to enhance is a health span, not just a lifespan or longevity. Unfortunately, the current sick care system hasn't achieved either. We're living a little bit shorter. We actually, as Americans, lost zero point 0.5 years on our lifespan in the last 4 years, and we're spending trillions of dollars on healthcare. So expenditure is high. We're more sick, and we're living shorter, and that's not why I went to med school, and this is why I decided to be one of the rebels like yourself and take a different path and bring evidence-based science to longevity and the science of aging and all of that. So, after I graduated, I didn't go to residency, and I said I want to change health policy. I said, how can I change a sick care system to healthcare? It's all about policy and the government changing its vision and incentive. The world is moved by financials at the end of the day, education and financials. And if you change the incentives in the system, you can change a little bit the system. So I decided to learn more about health policy and public health. And I did Harvard, I did Hopkins, and I did my studies and launched a career seeking how to find the pillars of longevity. How can we help people stay healthy longer?
I love longevity because longevity is something I think we all should care about. And I think it's really important that we spend as much time on the planet. I was just thinking about the ring that I can, for those who are watching the video, I have a updated ring that me and my wife decided was important to get for me. And I just want to be able to celebrate maybe another 40 years, maybe another 50 years. Maybe I'll get some more rings to put on my finger, but you
Yeah.
have to be here to make that happen. So I'm really, really excited about the discussion around longevity. And I know longevity has a lot to do with lifestyle. So I want you to talk a little bit about how our longevity is connected to nutrition and maybe even fasting.
Yeah. So longevity has five pillars in lifestyle. It's about nutrition, and maybe it's one of the most impactful one is your diet. And why it is such? Because from the day you're born to the day you die, you're putting that product called food in your body every day, 3 to 5 to 6 to 7 times a day. So that must be the most powerful signal you can send to your body. And we'll talk more about nutrition or the absence of nutrition, which is fasting. The second pillar that's very important for longevity is exercise. And the third pillar is stress. The fourth pillar is really sleep. And we can talk a lot about sleep. And the fifth pillar, which is the least talked about, in my opinion, probably the second most important or as important as nutrition, is receiving, giving love, and the social capital and the sense of happiness. Is if when you're serene, because sense of happiness, you eat a few times a day, but what drives your internal happiness and kind of healthy aging is that feeling, the emotions throughout the day. And there are a lot of studies talking about, even if you look at people who pray versus people who don't pray or do practice yoga or don't practice yoga, and a lot of that science. But that's the fifth pillar, the social capital that you have, and being serene and happy from the inside. So I decided to dedicate my career to nutrition and aging, because I felt that when I went to med school, I felt that I had all my intentions and mission and IQ and EQ encapsulated into a pill. That is, the best thing I could do for my patient is to subscribe them to a pill or to send them to surgery. I had nothing else to do. And I wanted to be a cardiologist. And when I was doing my rotations with the attendings, and I see that the 55-year-old male or female or 60-year-old, and they have a little bit of a high blood pressure and a little bit of higher cholesterol and a little bit of high blood sugar, and they leave the clinic with literally 5 pills. And by the way, they have to take all of them every day for the rest of their life. And the day off, it's not 2 days after, the day off they stop taking those, the blood pressure is back up and the blood sugar is back up. I was like, this is insane. And by the way, when you look at them, a little bit older, and therefore their metabolism is a little bit slower, and therefore if they still eat a little bit unhealthy, they're going to keep it in terms of fat, and fat creates insulin resistance, then the blood sugar increases and the blood pressure increases. It's a typical scenario of what we should practice today. First and foremost is lifestyle medicine. And this is what I decided to go from sick care to lifestyle medicine to enhance people's longevity and health span, and decided to focus on nutrition. Now, there's a Harvard study that shows that 73% of docs have no education in nutrition and are very hungry for such education. I was one of those. I barely had 1 or 2 hours of education on nutrition, and it was just, we believed it's either randomized clinical trials on pills or it's excuse my word, it's a BS, right? So I had to go and educate myself on the field, and a lot of the credibility goes back to a few stars in aging research. You mentioned Professor Walter Longo, who's the founder of the company that I now I'm the CEO of. That's called L-Nutra, or Longevity Through Nutrition, and he's named by Time Magazine among the top 50 most influential people in health.
Mm.
And he's very well known for his book, The Longevity Diet. I recommend everyone to go and read that book. It talks about how we as humans should eat to live healthy long, whether we're healthy or whether we're sick. So he describes the impact of nutrition that has, or fasting, both. So he studies nutrition and he studies fasting. And through him, I was able to gain a lot of awareness about how food drives a lot of signals in the body, and how the absence of food drives a lot of signals in the body. And then he decided to focus. There's a lot of experts and research on food itself. He decided to focus on the fasting side,
Right.
and why fasting is important and what is fasting, and he's kind of the grandfather of the science of fasting. And after 23, 24 years of research and a lot of we can talk about that part, a lot of research on periodic fasting, meaning fasting not just a few hours or intermittent fasting, but fasting for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. What happened to this body, and why the body takes a very protective route that's very critical for biological aging, and even for the body to help the body deal with certain health condition. And this is what I got a lot of my education, and decided to dedicate my professional life to bring back fasting to the world. And bringing in a safe way, not just ask people to be on water for 5 days because this is so difficult and dangerous for many. We had a breakthrough where we discovered how to mimic fasting with food, meaning can we give people certain kinds of food and keep the body in a fasting mode, and we called it the fasting mimicking technology, and this is the disruption. It's probably one of the biggest discovery in nutrition in recent age, the fasting mimicking technology or the fasting mimicking diet. And now we can help people fast while they're eating, which is an oxymoron on its own, and happy to talk more about that. And now I'm leading this company that develops this fasting mimicking technology, and we do research on it, how it can help people live a longevity lifestyle, and we this is what we dedicated our life to, be the first pharma food or nutritech company versus biotechs, and trying to help doctors, patients, people have options in life. It's not only about the pill; it could be about the pill, and we're not against the pill. We're just saying the pill has its own market share. You know, if you have cancer, if you have Alzheimer's, and there's a solution only in a pill, you should take that pill. And but if you have diabetes and you just want to start with a pill rather than start with the decrease of glucose intake and control your lifestyle, then that's wrong. And unfortunately, we were trained as physicians to directly put people on pills. Yeah, we give them minor recommendations here and there, but it has never been a true lifestyle medicine revamp. And this is the movement that we're leading in here.
Yeah, I think a lot of clinicians would be happy to take a healing approach, a root cause of disease approach, if they were only trained to think that way. Like
Yes.
the problem with a lot of things that we do in our education is that we're not, I mean, in some ways they're asking us to think, but in most ways they're asking us to remember something, regurgitate what they've learned. And then you stop thinking after a while. You're just trying to get through it, pass a test, understand what
Yes.
the guidelines say. And a model where we're allowed to think, a model where we're allowed to innovate, I remember that book, The Guy That Ran for President, right? Smart people should, build things, right? That type of book is important because if we allow people to think and think outside the box like you did, then maybe there's a different path. I've always felt like I've never been anti-pharma, but man, it'd be nice if pharma were able to innovate in the world of nutrition and put that into a pill in a way that will benefit people and likely decrease the chances that you'll have these uh, impacts that are negative because the body recognizes food as something that it deals with on a regular basis in nutrition. So why not take that approach? As because when we over concentrate certain chemicals and put it back into the body, it can be a little tricky for the body to figure that out. So I like the ideal of that. And again, longevity is just something we're all interested in. And so you mentioned fasting, and my question is maybe a little bit more about, why does fasting help you to live longer? When I was in my obesity training, I learned that, if you fast mice, they'll live, 50% longer, sometimes 80% longer. And so could you speak a little bit about why fasting is going to benefit us in that way?
Yeah. And so, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of diets, but fasting in the span of 5 years made it to the number one now
Mm,
diet in the U.S. So the number one diet now, with 12% of American adults, 10 to 12%, is fasting.
mm,
And the secret there is fasting acts in two ways. All the diets act with calories and ingredients, and we all understand that. Fasting acts with calorie deficit, but a huge calorie deficit because you're going to zero, right? So there's a huge calorie deficit. That's one angle, which is a stronger signal than any of the other diets. But there's another big dimension of fasting, which is cellular rejuvenation. It puts a protective pressure on the cell to rejuvenate. So let me put all this in kind of a little bit non-Chinese wording. Uh, um, so imagine you are running a company, and you need $1 million per month to run the company. So the company represents the body, and the body needs calories. Let's say $1 million dollars a month. Now, if I come to you as a CEO and I tell you, you know what, I'm sorry, but you have zero revenues this month, you have zero, and you need 1 million. So your bank account will drop very fast because you'll be spending a lot of money. So this is the quick weight loss. So fasting works by very fast weight loss. And as you know, if you lose weight, there's a lot of benefits there, especially if you're starting being overweight or being obese. A lot of the a lot of the overweight related metabolic issues are actually very prevalent today, be it insulin resistance, be it diabetes, be it hypertension, be it, we're now talking about Alzheimer's being diabetes type 3, be it cancer that's triggered by growth hormone related to food as well. So there's a lot of great benefits there on its own to justify why fasting is correlated with longevity and health span. So, so that CEO, going back to to you, the CEO, you're losing your bank account fast, so you're losing a lot of fat. You're happy with that. But what's going to happen? You're not going to say, you know what? I'm just going to sit and do nothing. You're going to feel a crisis. You have $0 and you need 1 million. And so you're going to go and you're going to try to restructure your company. It's like when a financial crisis hit. You go and you restructure. You say, you know what? I was overspending here. Let me cut the expenditure. I started hiring a little bit over, and I don't need these 4 or 5 employees here and there. The IT system is not working. So you start fixing. You started correcting to optimize the performance of the company to survive. So it was a stress, financial stress, that led to an optimization and the rejuvenation of your company. And the same thing happens with fasting. When you cross day one and day two, a lot of people think they're going to get those benefits in a few hours of fasting. You got to actually a little bit go longer, when because the early hours you have enough fat. The liver also has more credits, like a bank crediting you. The liver can credit you with neoglycogenesis, and you have glycogen in the muscle. So you have enough reserves to go by a few hours or a day plus. And then the crisis happens. So you have enough in the bank. The crisis happens when the reserves are being depleted and the cells are saying, hey, I got to count on myself now to eat what's inside of the cell because I'm not being fed from the outside. So what's also very powerful with fasting is every cell in the body needs calorie. Every cell. So when you fast, every cell of the body is going through the fasting. It's very powerful. You take a pill, as you and I know, it goes through one pathway or it goes through this system, or the fasting impacts the body from the top vertex all the way to your toes. Every cell in the body is feeling the pain and therefore has the pressure to go and either fix or be eliminated or rejuvenate. And this is the power of, we call that process autophagy, or self-eat and self-correction. And what boomed all this is that in 2016, the Japanese scientists that identified this phenomenon of autophagy, how it happens, they won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016. And the Nobel Prize in Medicine 2017 was about timing, and it was about the circadian rhythm, and how organs in the body also, they have an on and off, meaning when you go and sleep, we think sleep is resting the brain and resting the muscle, but actually every organ. That was the 2017 Nobel Prize. So 2 years in a row, they were related to timing and fasting. So meaning when you sleep, you want to rest your organs and you want to not eat for at least 10, 12 hours so that they also rest rather than put them at work while sleeping. So these two Nobel Prizes and the notion of how fasting works gave us a better understanding that food is not just about quantity and calories, but it's also about timing. And timing can play in resting the organs, and timing can play in putting pressure on certain cells to correct and to rejuvenate. And this is what took fasting more so into not just a lifestyle diet to control weight, but potentially become a therapy. And this is something we've launched to the world. We call it therapeutic fasting as well. And so there's a play for consumers, healthy folks, to keep their body in balance, healthy weight, and preventive with fasting. And there's a play for patients potentially. A lot of the current fasting trials are looking at, well, if I already have a health condition and I fast the cells who are suffering from that health condition, are the cells going to go and correct themselves?
Mm.
And by the way, most health conditions are related to food and weight, etc. So there's a correction, metabolic correction happening regardless of the cellular one. And this is why it's showing very powerful results on the fasting science as an intervention.
I was thinking about your earlier comments about how you have to have a pill for all these different medical conditions, and And since all of the cells will respond, I could see how, man, that's just one intervention that'll help the entire body and
Yeah.
all of the medical conditions. I love that. What's really funny is that I didn't expect to come to this podcast and have to seek a crisis. So I feel like I need to have a crisis now so I can,
You know,
you know.
and the same in exercise. If you remember the era when we discovered intensive training intervals, right? The intensive training intervals is what gives you a lot of the push to the muscle. And this is the same thing, is the intensive lack of
Yeah.
food intermittently. We're not talking longer period. You don't want to go to the CEO of the company and tell him, you know what, I'm going to take you 3 months of no food. He'll go bankrupt. But once he grow and he's adding fat, adding making decisions that are not at best because he has a lot of bank money in the bank and all, as he's spoiled, then you want to put him in check from time to time. We call them board meetings, by the way. Now that I'm remembering what happens to me as a CEO. So fasting is a board meeting check on a CEO.
That's funny, and I was amazed when you said the autophagy, which I think we're all familiar with the term. 2016. I had no clue that that being brought to the forefront was so recent. I thought that was
Yeah, the Nobel
wow,
Prize in Medicine was just
insane.
2016.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was just
fasting
2016.
fasting jumped from, if you look at the International Foundation and Food Council, they release every year big surveys on nutrition, and fasting as a word was absent in 26, absent from the entire thing. By 2018, it was the number one diet.
That's
So
insane.
yeah, and actually a lot of the credit goes back. We talked about longevity, about the Longevity Institute. You mentioned that at USC under the leadership of Professor Longo. A lot of the fasting trials have been happening there, and a lot of papers. And the National Institute of Health has been very supportive. Donated over $20 million into that research, seeing how important it is for different health conditions. So big thank you to the NIH for doing that support. And now you have over 28, 29 universities around the world doing fasting research on different health conditions. And there's a lot of promise there. We'll see. A lot of the trials will be released soon. But I tried today to explain to your audience why fasting and how does it work.
Yeah, and thank God I applied that research as well, since so much research that we think about is, related to the drugs we traditionally think about, and putting research into fasting, uh, on the surface, other than what is being done in the space that you're in, it doesn't sound like a profitable endeavor, right? So it's nice to know that there's money being invested in that space because so many people are trying it out. And because of that, one of the things I want you to speak to is distinguishing, um, you know, the benefits of the various types of fasting. Now, I'm a 16/8 guy, so you had me at hello.
Yeah,
However, hearing you say that it may take longer to get certain benefits are things
yeah,
that I've not done like a long fast. I just do a 16/8. I had some baked chicken for lunch. That's all I had. And I think I'll have ribs without the barbecue sauce tonight, and some, one or two non-starchy vegetables. That's kind of my routine. So would you walk through for the average listener who's, not as familiar with the types of fasting, why you would choose one or the other, and what the
yeah,
benefits may be?
for sure. So on the forest view, if you want, there are two terms you want to know, two notions you want to know about fasting. What we call intermittent fasting versus periodic fasting. So the first notion is how long. Intermittent fasting is from 0 hours to 2 days. Anything, if you fast for 10 hours, for 30 hours, you're still doing what we call intermittent fasting. And we'll talk about different subcategories. If you go beyond 2 days, we call it a periodic fasting, meaning you're fasting for a period. In periodic, and the separation is what we talked about, is cellular involvement. Below 2 days, you can lean on your, we call it the bank account, or the fat and the reserves you have in the body. When you cross 2 days, and there's a lot of discussion, sometimes you can start autophagy and cellular involvement at 1 day, a day and a half, but that's a start, meaning until you get autophagy well established, you need that couple of days. And again, it depends on the BMI, the age, and all of that, but we're generalizing a little bit over here. If you cross 2 days, we know the cells are engaged. We know the cells are feeling the pressure and the cells are rejuvenating. And this is where you get more of a cellular biological rejuvenation added to. And obviously, you fasted for at least 2 days to cross that, so you're losing more weight. So you do the intermittent one to balance, and we're going to talk about the subcategories to balance, to maintain, to reset. You do the longer one to add more rejuvenation and potentially therapy and healing to it. So that's the first notion, how many hours or days. The second notion, are you fasting on water or fasting on food? And that's an oxymoron in here when you say, how come I'm fasting on food? And again, this has been just made possible just a few years ago, 10, 11 years ago, where a lot of science was looking at how much I can feed the cell while still keeping the stress on the cell. So to simplify it, we had the example where you're the CEO of a company, you need $1 million every month to thrive. So if I come in and give you $400,000, hey, you still have a stress on $600,000. Now, even better if I give you four or $500,000 and I earmark those only to HR so that you still pay your employees and to product and supply so that you still can thrive the next month. And I give you $0 to be earmarked into the departments where you need to heal. And this is how the fasting mimicking diet or the fasting mimicking technology works. It gives you food, but it's earmarked to pathways that the cells actually are not satisfied with. And therefore, although you're eating, you're still feeling the stress of fasting. So you want to do the fasting in water for a shorter period. You mentioned you're doing 16, and some people do the 14 hours, and some people do 10 or 12. And in that window, it's healthy to do the water fast. You don't need to really eat to get enough kobai. You start doing it with food when you want to a little bit go longer. And we can talk whether the 16 hours is already too much or not, or the 18 hours. I mean, if you're, in a couple of words here, if you're overweight or you're pre-diabetic or you're concerned, you're at an age you're concerned that you might have a short-term health condition, going 16 hours or 18 or around this period of no food, I think would be justified because you want to induce fast a weight loss or a metabolic correction. But if you're healthy otherwise, if you're thin and healthy, you don't need to go that far on water with 16 hours. And why is that so? And this is a concept that most people don't know about, even though they're fasters. The concept is when you're starving the body, doing fasting on water, that's a starvation fasting. So once you cross hour 10, 12, your body digested the food, the nutrition went into the cells, and now the cells are calling for food. You start getting hungry. So the body naturally is saying, hey, I need food. If you go longer, definitely you're doing good by starving the fat and putting your hands and breaking down that fat. Or in the early period, it's more the liver that dumps the extra does neoglucogenesis, and you go to glycogen in the muscle. But anyhow, you're dipping into the reserves. But at the same time, you're starving your brain, you're starving your heart, you're starving the essential organs. The heart has to pump regardless whether you're fasting or not. The kidneys has to do their job regardless whether you're fasting or not. So there's a little bit of back and forth on if you're healthy and you don't need to lose weight and you're in good metabolic shape, why you want to go 16 and 18 hours. You can do the typical circadian rhythm fasting, meaning 12 hours overnight. Don't overeat at night because then you're going to become fat. You're going to add to your fat. Do your 12, 14 hours, you'll be great. Now, if you're a little bit obese, you have a health condition, yeah, I think the short-term benefits of going longer, 16 or 18 hours. And this is why you see the proponents of the 16 and the 18, they're actually physicians. Dr. Jason Fung, Dr. Peter Attia, and the likes, they see patients and they want to help their patients, and they tell them to go to this long. Now, when you generalize to everyone in society, it's not necessarily for everyone to go that long, and this is where there's this fight between the theories of you should eat breakfast, and breakfast helps you with longevity, and the theories of fasting helps you with longevity, and they're both true. It's just who's doing what. If you have a health condition or you need to lose weight super fast, going to 16 probably is going to help you, but then you go back to 12 when you're healthy. And if you're starting in a healthy shape, probably you don't have to starve all your essential organ every day for 18 hours just to say I'm doing intermittent fasting. And that's probably the right answer there.
I like that.
Now, when you go longer, we recommend you do it with food. I'm biased. Obviously, I lead the company that has discovered that, and but at the same time, we're coming out of University of Southern California, and our founder Walter Longo donates all his shares back to charity. So I have a bias, but as a physician and leader of this company, and seeing all the science, whenever you want to starve, whenever you want to fast, and you want to go long, if you have a better solution that can at least nourish your body, going back to the CEO, if you give that CEO who needs $1 million, you give him $0, he's going to have to make some decisions that are not healthy. Meaning, some of the superstar employees might leave because he cannot pay them. He's not going to be able to put an order for products and supplies. Imagine if he's leading a hospital, you're not going to have medicine for next month because he couldn't put that order. So there's painful decisions when you have nothing that are unnecessary. Now, if you go and give that CEO $400,000, 500,000, now at least he can buy his purchase, he can still pay his team, and then he will go and find some efficiencies in other spaces. So we definitely believe that doing this fasting with food or the fasting with technology could be a good lever and make it easy and safe and compliant for consumers and patients.
Um, I'm intrigued by the idea that there could be something you could take that mimics your diet. I'm also intrigued by, what foods you should be eating to kind of live a longer life. So I guess I'm curious if I were to advise a patient who's interested in longevity, they're intrigued by this conversation, and they may even want to look at the types of things you guys offer patients. But if you're just going to the grocery store
Yep.
and they want to live longer, what
Yeah.
types of foods do you say you should probably eat more of this and a
Yeah.
little less of that? What
Yeah.
what would you say?
So we also study longevity outside of fasting in nutrition for longevity. It's actually a word we coordinate nutrition for longevity, and we if you read the longevity diet book, that answers perfectly the question. It's called the longevity diet by Walter Longo, but he looked at 5 pillars to answer exactly the question, the golden question you're talking about. And the pillars he looked at to answer, and I'm going to give you all the answers, but to tell you the type of proof we went after is: number one, you want to study centenarians, people who live already 100 and beyond, right?
Right.
That's the proof is in the pudding, right? Less pudding in this case, but good proof. So he went around the world, and then met a lot of people who lived 100 and beyond, and see what they have in common. What do they eat in common? The second thing, you want to go back and understand evolution and history and human evolution, because we're tailored by nature. We're sculptured. If we eat sugar, high sugar, maybe for the next 100 of years, maybe the pancreas will be bigger and will adjust to it, right? So the way we are today is because that's the way we ate. Forget about the last 50 years where we drastically deviated, but I'm saying for thousands and thousands of years we used to live in a certain environment, and our organs and metabolism adjusted to that. So you want to understand that to rematch our body with what we were tailored to eat and how to eat.
Yeah.
And then you want to go back to systems biology, understand how really the body works. And in pharma, we study one receptor, one pathway, and we go after a drug. And this is why when you hear every pharma ad, there's 60 side effects that have to be listed, because hey, we paid attention to the liver, we didn't pay attention that much to everything else. So when you go back, you want to study systems biology, and you want to understand the impact of every intervention on every organ in the body.
Yeah.
Then you want to go and do preclinical trials and clinical trials to go and prove in a randomized setting what you're talking about. So what's the conclusion of all this? Should I stop, or you want to hear it?
Oh, yeah. You know what?
This is
Let's
where
go to a commercial
this is
break,
where
right?
so the answer is, you know, it's definitely a diet that, and again, I'm going to give the general answer, but then we got to tailor it, because, nutrition and precision nutrition and life cycle is different. A kid that's 14-year-old that has to grow physically before aging, is different than a 65-year-old that start decreasing his digestion and absorption, is different than a 40-year-old man, is different. So I'm going to give a general answer, and then we can talk a little bit about different cycles of life. But in general, we as humans, we lived around rivers. some people tell you in caves. I mean, we slept to hide in a cave, but water was the essence of life. Where there was water, there was green and grass, and you can drink, and you can find a fruit and a vegetable, and some other animals will come. And the fish was there. The fish is the only animal that's not going to fly or run, so it was easy to fish. So definitely a plant-based diet and fish being the main source of protein is what we believe, what we call a pescatarian diet, is what we believe humans had for a long, long time before we started hunting and eating more red meat. So, but we learned how to hunt long times ago as well, and red meat appeared a little bit. So anywhere between what we call pescatarian, which is plant-based plus fish as the main source of animal protein, and we can talk a lot about why fish and all of that. But in a natural setting, it was the easiest to get for humans in the old days. And a little bit of red meat introduction, which is what, if you add red meat to that pescatarian diet, you can call it a flexitarian diet. A lot of people call it flexitarian, meaning you flex it a little bit. You're a little bit flexible in adding some meat from time to time to your diet. That seems to be the commonality of rematching our body with what our body used to eat. Now, if you tell me, hey, I'm 25, 30, and I don't care much about, I'm not pre-disease, and I want to build some muscle, I want to look great, should I eat a little bit more on the protein side? And say, then that's your priority. Then the answer would be yes. If you tell me, look, I'm actually 75, and I barely absorb now because of my age any meat, then yes, you should have more of the meat, and the studies show that. Now, if you tell me I'm 55, I'm 60, meaning you're at high risk of any one of the big chronic diseases, should you eat very high meat and very? I would say no. Go and slow down the boost to your system, because you don't want to rush your system into entering into that cancer or diabetes or Alzheimer's. So there's a life cycle approach to nutrition. We want to start talking precision nutrition, life cycle nutrition. This is what we study. This is how we brought the best doctors and physicians to study nutrition. We believe in it as again, food is medicine, and we're studying all this in detail. But the generalized question is anywhere between a flexitarian and a pescatarian diet is a diet that goes with human nature, human evolution, and human potential.
And my assumption, if I have a certain background, I'm from a certain culture, and I would assume there's some variation because of the different cultures historically. So this is a broad stroke, I get that, but would it also make sense for certain cultures to be factored in? Like, I'm an Eskimo, or my family's from certain parts of Africa, and man, it seems like they thrive on these types of diets. So,
Yeah,
is that factored in when you guys make recommendations, or as you think about this topic broadly?
yeah, because culture is tailored by environment in history and tradition, and what tailors you, which ends up being epigenetic signals and how you behave, right? And on your metabolism, if you're an Eskimo at a very high temperature and you have a low metabolism, is different than if you live in a different weather and you're outside exercising every day and you need to compensate for that. So definitely metabolic rate, temperatures, phase of life, the culture, it's all impact. We're there's no one company that's there that's refining every food for every person, but I think
Right.
this is what's going to happen in the next 10 years. The more AI comes in and you build the right determinants in the machine learning, and what we're working is on the inputs and determinants, I think the outcome then would be tailored to different people, specifically to every individual. Again, plus the microbiome, plus the DNA studies will give you a great profile of, I might have genes of obesity and predisposition and cancer. You might not have those. What does that mean at age 55? If you don't have them, you could eat a little bit more protein than I can, or a little bit more
Mhm.
calories, etc. So that precision nutrition and tailored nutrition is a movement that's going to grow very, very big in the next few years.
That's fair. Now, what's funny is that this entire conversation, I'm holding my breath because for a couple of reasons. One is because, so I do Dr. Ben Bokikio's high intensity training, so it's not, hit as much as just the take one of the eyes out. And I just do slow, intense training. And I'm using that to build muscle. So my brain is saying I need protein. I definitely eat more, beef than maybe is being suggested here, and maybe because I'm metabolically healthy, it's probably okay at this stage of my life. But So I guess my question is, as maybe some listeners are holding their breath too, so now even the diet doctor has a higher protein
Yeah.
section on their website now, which is newer for them. So any other thoughts about how protein can be helpful or harmful? It
Yeah.
sounds like too much could be a problem for a lot of people, but any additional thoughts about protein so I can stop holding my breath?
Yeah, after the fasting question, this is the best question. Because I feel like we're on a mission to bring true science to people, and
Yeah,
protein has been, we the last 20 years, what's the verb? We devilized carbs, right? Carb is the devil, and protein is the friend, right?
right.
And a lot of marketing dollars from the protein companies, and who doesn't like to have a little bit more muscle on the short term? So the look is good and the marketing is there. Let's go and eat protein. Well, let's talk a bit science. So when you eat carbs, you're adding a fuel to your body the same way if you eat protein, you're adding, the cells consume two things. It's proteins or amino acids and carbs, right? This is when you go and you put gas in a tank, the body has two gases that can fill the tank. One is carbs and one is protein. So when you eat carbs, we all know that insulin increase because you give me a fuel. Insulin is a growth factor. I'm now like going to grow, right? I have fuel. I can kick the gas. What people don't talk about, they don't even know how to pronounce it, is when you eat protein, you increase IGF. And IGF is insulin like growth factor. It's the same concept, same growth factor. And so they're both giving that signal of growth to the body. And what does that mean, growth? Growth is a biological growth. We as humans, we don't grow anywhere. We grow towards our end. And if you hit the gas faster, you're going to reach your destination even, faster. And so, and I call the phenomenon happening today where all of us are eating high protein is like the diabetes of protein, I call it. And in the boost of IGF, there's a lot of studies showing in mice and now in humans, and there will be a major meta-analysis going to be published soon by our founder, showing that if you spike IGF very high, you're pushing your body to age faster, and therefore you're increasing risk of cancer, diabetes, and all the chronic diseases. You're becoming biologically older than what you are. And there's a lot of actually proof of that in practice, meaning either the big bodybuilders who inject themselves eat a lot of protein 6 times a day, no fasting, high protein, and therefore they end up, having chronic disease. First, they look older very fast at age 50, and then you see them leaving us, unfortunately, at age 50s and 60s and 70s. The Ronnie Coleman, Coleman and the others. Unfortunately, they injected themselves so much in growth hormone. Growth hormone leads to IGF as well, in protein, that their biological age, although they're 50, they're 70 from the inside, or they're 60 from the inside, and therefore they develop disease in early years. And the other extreme proof is people who live with acromegaly, meaning their brain is just producing growth hormone, which then increase IGF the same way protein increase IGF. And these people, on average, very well published, live 10 years less than the average population. So Andre the Giant and others who unfortunately also left us early are the symptoms of that. So we have a lot of science and also epidemiological proof that if you proteinizate your body, and I call it diabetes of protein, you're actually accelerating your aging and the rate of chronic disease. So
Mm,
this doesn't mean that, oh, I should not eat protein and we're against protein. Not at all. What we're just saying is get your zero point 0.7, zero point 0.8 grams per day. But then you want to build more muscle, go to 0.9, 1, 1.1, 1.2. You don't have to go 3, 4, 5 grams of protein. The muscle is not growing proportionally as higher. Otherwise, we'll all be like Hulks looking. The muscle is barely growing for this extra intake. And a lot of folks eat 6 times a day protein. So the muscle is barely growing for them, but the signal of IGF and aging and the speed of acceleration of aging is detrimental to these folks. So what I'm trying to say in here is that, hey, you want to build muscle, eat a little bit more protein. We agree with. Don't go over the board because the cost effectiveness is flipped. It's costing your body and your aging so much for just a little bit of muscle gain. Now, again, this is general answer. We go back to what's your age, what's your goal. If you're
right.
a 14-year-old adolescent, you're going to grow physically and you need to enhance that, so you should be on a high protein diet. If you're above age 65, you have less capability to absorb proteins, and muscle becomes an aging organ. After age 65, 70, moving around is actually very important for your health. Otherwise, you'll gain weight pretty fast and you have complications. So muscle becomes very important at that end as an
Hmm.
aging organ. And these two extremes here, we say, hey, high protein is good. Now you're 40 to 55, 60, you're pre-disease, you're still mobile, muscle is not your top, longevity organ, but you're starting getting closer to your first health incident. At that age, you want to be eating very high level of sugars and protein to boost insulin and insulin-like growth factor to boost your aging and acceleration to getting into the disease.
It sounds like we need a professional to guide us a little bit because it could be very nuanced. And I know another thing that may complicate these conversations because we're trying to be evidence based is, and I know Sean Baker and others are trying to raise money to do research, and they're in the carnivore community. And I'm sure if I'm holding my breath, they're definitely holding their breath right now.
Yeah,
So my thought is, I don't know how much research in the past that's been done really isolates for certain types of communities. Like, so is something happening in a carnivore, as an example, that's metabolically so different compared to the other folk who are traditionally in a study like this that it
yeah,
may somehow correct for some of these things. So just a couple of thoughts about how we interpret that research and whether or not it can be then kind of, used to represent the different nuances that it's hard to study all of these in a bubble. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So what's your
yeah.
thoughts on that?
No, and again, this goes back to precision nutrition. So if
Yeah.
somebody is diabetic, you're not going to give him more carbs to decrease his protein. You want to go very low on the carb. You keep the protein normal, and we call it ketogenic, right? So in that setting, yes, of course. Again, there's
Yeah.
a short-term reason why to still lean on the protein versus the carb. And again, this is why I don't like to generalize, but I would stand firm on my general assumptions and theories here. I don't think what's happening at this mass level where everyone is rushing for high protein. I think, and by the way, we see the circumstances. We see the rate of cancer increasing, right? In the 90s, cancer flourished and everyone said, oh, because we have better diagnostics. Now we have the same better diagnostics for the last 20 years and cancer is still on the rise. Alzheimer's is just super on it for the first time in history in the last few years. We're spending more money on Alzheimer's than on diabetes. So again, low carb, I'm okay for that for certain people, and then you have to feed them the protein they gotta eat something, otherwise they'll be fasting. But in general, we're definitely over proteinizated versus what we as humans are used to eat.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that we flipped from diabetes to Alzheimer's. I knew it was right there, but it's amazing that we've made that flip. But I do know because we have it in our family in terms of who we take care of, it is absolutely a lot of resources that go into Alzheimer's and dementia. So it's very interesting to hear you talk about that. And my podcast is called Protecting Your Nest, and you mentioned sleep earlier and how important that is. So I'm thinking about, sleep as a general concept, how it helps to improve longevity. I've heard those concepts before. So what's your thoughts about the importance of sleep as it relates to longevity? Where does that fit?
Yeah. So when I graduated from medical school like you, we swear on primum nil nocere. First, don't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm not a sleep expert. So what I'm going to say,
Yeah.
I stand firm by my nutrition answer. But I'll tell you what I know. What I know is, and we talked a little bit about it on the Nobel Prize also for 2017, which was on circadian rhythm. I think when we sleep, there's a lot more than what we think is going. It's not just resting my muscle and my head a little bit for the next morning. It's actually a full, and this is why we don't recommend you eat right before or during or you snack at night. It's actually your entire body is going into that reset mode. And we always talked about the brain wave and the high, and we never understood why it's literally the reset that's happening, right? And you need that to recharge your body. That word reset, reboot, that's a correlate of sleep, that's a correlate of fasting, is the same system where we're allowing the body to first phase rest, the second phase to reset as well, to be able to. And I think this is obviously central to longevity now. I don't proclaim I know whether it's a 7 hour or 8 or 7.5, or but like
Right.
everything, every person is different. The genetic bagage and the epigenetics and what they need and what you did during the day and what how old are you. So there's precision sleep. Let's corner that. Let's corner that word today. Precision sleep and tailored sleep is next. But yeah, obviously, you don't want to sleep 3 hours and you don't want to sleep 16 hours. Probably it's somewhere between that 6 and 8, which is maybe like fasting, is going beyond just the balance, but a little bit of the reset and the rejuvenation. And a lot of experts agree that this is important for longevity.
Yeah, I just answered a question in our discussion chat for my nutrition and functional medicine, and when I looked at the study that talked about sleep, it's exactly what you said. That it was somewhere between 6 and 8 hours that were considered. It wasn't negatively affecting your morbidity and mortality, but if you sleep too much, it wasn't good. If you don't sleep enough, it wasn't good. So it was really
Yeah,
interesting to see that kind of bell shaped curve, and very interesting to say the least. So, and again, um, um, if you were to advise beyond fasting, the nest is nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, avoiding, healing from trauma, and there's other things with the rope acronym, but um, broadly speaking, beyond the fasting, beyond the sleep, anything else that you really, clear muscle mass is critical. Obviously, we talked about that. As long as you don't overdo the protein, anything else that you want the listeners to think about
yeah.
as relates to longevity that you would recommend we focus on?
Yeah, I'll close with the same opening. It's 5 pillars. It's nutrition, eat healthy, balance, pescatarian, and add some meat for a flexitarian diet. Do your 12 max 14 hours of intermittent fasting. Exercise 3 to 4 to 5 times a week. Um, be happy. We talked a lot about that social capital, that serenity, that happiness, laughing and loving and receiving love and allowing that moments of happiness
Mm.
built into you, I think is critical. And definitely you mentioned the sleep, and I would add the stress to it. These are the 5 pillars: nutrition, exercise, stress, sleep, and happiness.
Yeah, as much as people don't emphasize community and love,
Yes.
it is no question. I think about even my own personal success, just becoming a doctor, growing up in a tough neighborhood, uh, you know, being able to maybe send my kids to a top 20 school, and spending all that money, right? And being able to write that check, right? Is it really being able to write the check that makes me happy? Not really. It's having a relationship with my kids, having a relationship with my wife, being able to support her and her journey as she deals with her dad with dementia, right? So he's here with me. I'll be spending time with him after we finish talking. So, but those are the things that matter more and give you a sense of purpose. And I think just like writing a gratitude journal, right? Just
Yeah.
being able to reflect on that, and sometimes I think about my wife and just her ability to kind of provide cover for me. Don't forget to do this. The ribs I spoke of. Oh, don't worry, I took care of the ribs. I put that keto rub on it, right? The low carb rub,
Yeah.
and then I'll do the other part of the dinner. But it's a partnership, it's a team sport, and I just think that that has to mean something. And then if our partners and the people we love understand these other pillars, then we can work together, make sure we get our sleep, make sure we have some type of exercise regimen, and I think all those things make a lot of sense. So as we kind of get close to wrapping up, your true north. So when you think about where you want to be in the future, or the work you're doing, how do you see that in the next 5 or 10 years? What's your kind of true north?
Well, my I will rest in peace when I see that nutrition and fasting mimicking diet and technology is now a new option for doctors and patients and people, consumers at large, that they feel that, hey, I have more options in life that can
Yeah.
work, they can help me stay healthy long. And we at the company, we say if we can add 1 billion life year to human health span, we'd be really happy with that.
Yeah, I like that. And I love this idea of having an option like that. I think it sounds, at least in theory, that it would be easier because you're not, completely devoid of something going in your mouth. So I think that sounds like a pretty good goal. And again, we're my wife and I were joking about the fact that somebody went into space a day or two ago
Yes.
before the recording, right? And she was like, at first she said, "Why would they bother?" And I'm like, "Well, they probably said that about the Wright brothers, right? Why would they bother?" But now it's like getting on a plane is no big deal, and maybe one day going into space won't be a big deal. So this innovation, this outside the box thinking that led you away from the clinical practice into a different space could potentially have a bigger impact on the world. And one of the reasons why I started this podcast and YouTube channel is to make a bigger impact. I'll still see patients, I'll still do that work. But man, if I could reach somebody who had not heard this message, or if I can learn something from guys like yourself and be better because of it, I think that's all wonderful. So let's make sure you're okay. Let's make sure you're protecting your nest. So as we think about the pillars, which basically are the nests, but most of which are the nest: the nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, how we think, and avoiding trauma, and then the rope because we're climbing up that nest, to get to the nest, making sure our relationships are okay, avoiding organisms and pollutants that can harm us. And then the E is to protect our emotions and making sure our life experiences serve us. So when you think about your journey over the next year, are there areas that you plan to focus on more that you want to be better at?
I think definitely the balance of work and life is something that is critical for me. We had I'm one of the incriminated folks to bring fasting back to life, and it was a big task to bring what was called starvation and are you crazy? Back in 2016 when we launched that concept. And I went to school. I mentioned the Harvard, the Hopkins, and then I was at University of Chicago, a director of health policy. These are three out of the top five, six schools of the world. And I was like, it's very easy. I'll call my friend doctors. I'll tell them about it. They'll prescribe it. Easy, right? In the number of rejection of, are you crazy? Why would I starve my patients? Why would I, how come they're going to eat a fasting mimicking technology or diet or, and then again, so it was what I'm trying to say, it was a very big task for the last 4 or 5 years. And I feel that my balance of life with spending time with family was sacrificed big time. And I'm trying, now that we're getting more established and I have other leaders supporting me, I'm trying to go back and balance and give some quality time to my family as well. So this is what I think is would be a great achievement for me in the next year on a personal level.
Nice. And I think the pandemic has taught us how important that is, but it's also helped us understand there's so many ways to stay connected. So I think if we're, touching each other, even if it's virtual periodically, I think it'll work out. But yeah, there's a level of appreciation of the people we care about. And I do miss doing as many video visits as I was doing during the pandemic, but I also like being in person. So I think a little bit of both. I think I actually did both today in my clinic, and but yeah, I agree with you that that relationship thing is important. And another thing that I've learned personally is that it's okay to have a relationship coach. It's okay to kind of learn some new techniques. One of the things that we did recently is learned about the Seven Principles of Marriage by Gottman. And it was evidence based. And so, in fact, I wrote an article with the diet doctor that talked about relationships for October. And I shared the value of a book like that. And then you get a chance to look at that relationship and enhance it and know how to talk to each other, know how to listen to each other. So it's not just spending time with each other, it's being able to do it at a higher level. And all of a sudden, that person that you sleep next to, you really appreciate them and understand where they're coming from because you had these conversations. So, but again, I really enjoyed this conversation. I have a new relationship, and
Mhm.
that's with you, Dr. Joseph. And I hope my audience really enjoyed our conversation. And now they have learned about something some of them have never heard of: fasting, mimicking diet. Who'd have thought, right? So thanks again for being with me today, and really appreciate you.
Appreciate you much, and again, I hope we really touch somebody's life today, and recommend everyone go and read the Longevity Diet book and start thinking about how to improve relationship and happiness and take care of their food on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to provide a link to that book in the podcast show notes, and I appreciate you. So, guys, all of you guys who are watching or listening today, we spent some time with a longevity expert, a topic I think we're all, interested in because we want to be here with our families because, more time on the planet is really more time to make an impact, spend time with family, and really to achieve your life purpose. I think you can kind of feel what my guest's purpose is, and he's expressed that, and I want you to be able to fulfill your purpose. So consider learning more about longevity. Make that one of your goals in life, so that you'll be better prepared to extend your life as much as possible. So I hope you walk away from this conversation with at least one tip that helps you along your goal of being a resident of this planet longer. So thanks again to my guests, and for those who are listening, I ask that you be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.